Alright guys, here are my impressions for Persona 4. I'm approximately 10 hours into the game, not including the time I lost from when I died. The best way to describe the Persona series is like a life simulator game, so think Harvest Moon with like daily chores and stuff like that, as well as your typical dungeon crawler, where you're going through dungeons that change every time you enter and everything like that. And you can also think of it as sort of like a Pokemon game, where you collect these personas and you can fuse them and you level them up aside from your own character leveling up, and they gain new abilities and they can change into different personas, and you use these in battle. So the main story of Persona 4 is that instead of being in a Japanese city like the other Persona games were known for, they put you in a rural town known as Inaba, and you go to live with your parents' uncle, I believe it is, and his daughter. So the main hub of the world, where you always start your days off, are in your home or their home, and from here you can check the weather, and I'll explain why the weather is a big part of this game. You find out that you have this power to enter TVs. Basically, at midnight on rainy days, if you look into a TV, you can see somebody in there, and it's supposedly your soulmate. But as it comes to turn out, the people that you see in the TV are actually going to be murdered, and it's your job with the friends from your school to go into TVs and save them from being murdered. So it's sort of like a murder mystery game coupled with an RPG and, like I said, a simulator, life simulator. It's very, very original, and really you've never played anything like it before. Once you enter the TVs, that's where it kind of takes on its RPG dungeon crawler roots. Now, 10 hours in, I've only played the first dungeon, so I cannot speak for the variety of, the other dungeons and everything like that. But once you enter the TV, that's where you enter the RPG aspect of the game, where you're going through the dungeons, and they're randomly generated with items and pathways. And that's where you get into battles, and they are not random. You can see the enemies on screen, and a big part of that is attacking them first before they attack you. Once you get into battle, it plays out like a standard turn-based RPG. Now, one thing about Persona 4, unlike other RPGs, is that it's heavily reliant on weaknesses and strengths and all this kind of stuff, status alignments. This is one of the few RPGs where you can use stat boosting or stat decreasing spells and abilities on bosses and have them actually work. Every time in like a Final Fantasy game, if you go to decrease the boss's attack with a spell, it gets resisted. Persona 4, no, it'll actually work. Especially on enemies, resistances and strengths with spells, it's the biggest part of the game, because if you hit an enemy with their weakness, it'll knock them down, making them unable to attack or defend, and then you'll also get an extra attack. So think of this. You get into a random battle, there's 4 enemies. They're all weak to ice. If you hit one of the enemies with an ice spell, it'll knock them down, grant you an extra turn. You hit another enemy with an ice spell, it'll knock them down, grant you an extra turn, and it'll keep going and going and going, and when all the enemies are knocked down, you can go into an all-out attack mode and attack all the enemies. So in a sense, once you learn enemies' weaknesses, battles become easy. So the fun of the game is using your personas, and each persona has different spells, like, there's ice spells, there's electricity spells, there's wind spells, there's physical spells, there's healing spells, and you use these against your enemies, finding out what's their resistance, what's their weakness, and exploiting them. And after battles, you will get normal experience for your character, so he levels up, gets more health, more magic points, or SP points, and also your personas will level up. So if you use a persona in battle, they will also gain experience as well, on top of your own character, and then that's when they learn new spells and everything like that. Now, instead of Persona's 3 system, where it was a huge 100-floor dungeon, Persona 4 actually breaks them up into smaller dungeons, about 10 floors. And throughout the dungeons, it really does lack save points. So far, from what I've played, the first dungeon, I die and lose, I'm not even kidding, like an hour's progress of leveling up and everything like that. So it is pretty tough. You can run into a group of enemies, and depending upon what persona you have equipped, you'll gain their weaknesses. So say you have a persona equipped that's weak to fire, and you get in the battle where the enemies have a fire spell. If they hit one of your characters, that are weak to fire, it'll knock you down and grant them an extra turn. So you can easily get annihilated in a single turn. And the boss, in particular, one of the, like, maybe the second or third boss I faced, totally annihilated me, and that's what caused me to go back and level up so I can eventually beat him. Now, grinding in this game is, it's not, it is important, because here's the thing. The game goes on a strict time basis line, where you're always on a race against time. There's a calendar in the game where after a certain amount of time, if you don't rescue the person that's in the TV, it's game over. So, after a period of rain in the game, it'll turn to fog, and basically you have to rescue that person by a set date. So after it's rained a long time, the next day when it's foggy, that person inside the TV is going to die. So you have to rescue them by then. So you can't really go through this game taking your time too much. You kind of have to carefully plan it out. So in terms of planning out your time, instead of doing just regular dungeon crawling and gaining experience, you can also go into the sim-like aspect of the game in the town hub, where basically you can go around, you can hang out with your friends, you can level up your social links, which basically, this is where it's sort of like a life emulation game. You can gain bonds and make friends in the game, and say instead of going to a dungeon and leveling up, you can choose to hang out with one of your teammates or one of your friends, or you can join a club at school, and you gain bonds, and by hanging out with them, you level up your rank in that social class. So say instead of going to level up in a dungeon, I want to go hang out with my basketball club at school. That will grant me a friendship with a couple of people in the club, and let's say that friendship is the strength social link. So every time I hang out with them and I start leveling up that social link, every time I create a persona of the strength category, and each persona has their own different categories, you know, there's all these different magician, strength category, there's the sun, there's all these weird persona categories. But when I level up that social link, when I do create new personas by fusing them, they'll get an experience bonus. So far, I'm really, really enjoying this game. The whole setting, the whole atmosphere, it's very original. The music in particular is excellent. It's leaps and bounds better than Persona 3, which had a really jazzy vibe to it. The music in here is much better, much more like a rockier J-pop edge to it. It's really catchy. And the whole setting, like with the whole, when you get into the TVs, it sort of takes on this whole new, like, it looks like you're playing the game through a static TV, you know, like during the battles, the shadows of your characters will have like TV gain exposure lines going through them. You know, they'll be static around the edges of the screen, and it's just this weird, psychedelic, trippy world, which is really, really refreshing in terms of its presentation. And the characters are really likable. Like, in particular, when you're in school, you know, you'll have to answer questions, but this is where you get to know your characters the most. And they interact, and also the conversations are often really funny and well written. The voice actors do a very good job. So just to clear up the gameplay and make sure that you're all clear on how it exactly works, here's how it'll go. A typical day in Persona: you start off in your house. You can either choose to go out, hang out with your friends, build up your social links. You can even get a job, and you can gain money from doing that. But basically, if you choose to go to your job, if you choose to hang out with your friends, it'll end the day and you'll start all over back in your house and repeat the process. But you also have to balance out your time in the dungeons. You have to level up, you have to make sure that you're getting experience, to make sure that you're ready to face the boss at the end of the dungeon so that you don't get a game over. So if you do go to a dungeon, you skip all the social events. You can't do any of the social stuff because those will end your day. So once you go to a dungeon, you can advance as far as you can, get the experience you need, and come back out, go to bed, and you start all over again. And that's basically Persona 4 from so far what I've played. And it's been very enjoyable in terms of the life simulation aspect. In terms of my complaints with the game so far, I really have none. They do a lot of good things really well in this game, and there's really nothing that stands out as being terrible. So, really, if you own a PlayStation 2, this game is $40. Don't let it slip under your radar. You know, this is one of the last great games for the PlayStation 2 that you're going to find for the system. Don't let it pass up. I'm 10 hours in so far. I put about 12 hours in, minus the hours that I've lost. But really, this is the type of game that RPG fans need to buy. You can't miss this one. Look forward to my review when I'm much further in the game or either done with it. This is just my impressions. But so far, guys, I highly, highly recommend this one. definitely pick it up.